So let's kick us off. We've got some questions for Morten. We're going to dive into the emerging concerns, exciting developments, and some sophisticated threats in the cyber world. And let's get going. Enjoy.
Yeah, and great to be here with you, Danny. Thank you for setting this up.
No worries. So let's get into it. So first question is, let's list your top 2, or discuss, should I say, emerging cyber security concerns and the reasons why.
Yeah, and I think my first point, and it's been there for a while, and we're kind of, I'd say, is re-emerging. One thing we need to remember is that these cybersecurity actors work as a business. We kind of called it out way back. I think it was 2017 as one of the first businesses on the planet in the cyberspace. But if you really look at it now, what we called out back then is exactly what's happening now. Attackers are getting more and more sophisticated, and to kind of make that a little bit more plain English, that means that they run it like a business. They have a marketing team, they write up content, they send out, in this case, spam emails, but targeted emails, in fact, to businesses where maybe, and to use a little bit more technical lingo, might not be correctly configured on kind of email security. So DMARC might not be configured, TLS security might not be configured, hence making them vulnerable to both being sent on their behalf and also being targets of spam campaigns coming in. So clearly this kind of type of attack, where it's bulk attacks, are rapidly increasing because the malware actors are seeing benefits from increasing the volume, but then also it's becoming more and more targeted. Content is getting better, the whole relay there is getting a lot better, and that's clearly going into 2024. That's clearly a concern I have, that this trend will certainly continue, because the money needed for, in a very harsh global economic climate, money is easier to find in a criminal fashion than it maybe is in a legit fashion, and hence this is just a double down area for cyber criminals for sure, honing in their business of marketing and targeting the end users.
Yeah, I remember at the Brigantia event recently, which you spoke at, Jeff White, the host of the podcast Lazarus Project, spoke about the business behind this, and he showed some case studies of this type of stuff happening. Quite scary. It's like the team that we have at Heimdal, they have them all hosted on the deep web, and there's a whole business. They're even right now, they're speaking to, they're posting their jobs on recruitment platforms.
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
you can apply for a job with this underbelly, deep criminal.
It's
enterprise.
literally insane. But when I first spoke about that back in 2017, people couldn't really, I think, fathom what that actually meant. But it does actually mean you have a business, you have a CEO, you have a head of fraudulent emails, perhaps you have a head of complex attacks, you have a head of whatever cash relay. So basically, the finance team. How do you then convert your money that you acquire from all these businesses you hacked into real white laundered cash? All of that is stuff that needs to happen in such a business, and it is certainly happening. But you need to have all these people in place, and hence it's a business. It's just a reverse business. The problem there is not only is it, of course, criminal activity, but secondly, the way they do that activity is typically they'll find people in very poor countries. Could be Somalia, could be, I don't know, Bangladesh, etc. And then they'll put those to work at the keyboard and force them to work if they have to, which is, of course, not ideal. Those are, of course, the worst cases of all of them, but it double compounds the problem, I would say.
That's interesting, because there is, I know, in the supply chain, there's often, I see slave trade is a thing that's spoken about a lot, and that seems to touch on that aspect of things. Is there anything else in the supply chain that I know you've spoken about this previously? Is there anything that you think is coming up the supply chains or some
a great follow-on question for sure, because that's clearly the second leg of my concern going into next year, is actually the supply chain attack. Because again, if you look at what's happening in the market, and it would be lovely to be drawing this, but if you look at the customer side of it, so the end user B2B side, technical complexity of using a laptop or a mobile device today is increasing faster than the knowledge level, which means that what happens in a business is increasing sizes of business offload their technical IT to outsiders. So hence the rise in MSPs. So the MSP market is kind of going like that, upwards towards larger customers especially in verticals where technological advance is lower, or technological knowledge is lower. So if you go kind of small governments, industries will still be on-prem or managed internally, but if it's a more commonplace service sector, it'll be faster offloaded to an MSP. So that's why I'm tilting my hand going like that, but upwards at the same time. So there'll be certain verticals where they still don't offload to MSPs, but there'll be then increasingly seat sizes of service-oriented businesses where they are offloading increasingly. And clearly the supply, that kind of advances the supply chain problem because you have more and more sitting with the MSPs. Knowledge is decreasing. There's a scarcity of IT resource, so it kind of compounds the problem around the MSPs. So there's no doubt that going into 2024, MSPs are going to be a big target for cyber criminals. So within that cyber criminal organization that we kind of painted up before, you have the mass marketing bucket, which we kind of touched on initially, but then you have the complex attack, the head of complex attacks, and that guy will certainly be tasked with finding these MSPs to target in increasing fashion. And commonplace attacks, they will certainly be trying to get high-level credential access. So admins within those MSPs will certainly be highly targeted with complex attacks to try and penetrate them and gain access to servers. And then if you do that, then you're right in the customer sphere of all those MSPs, having full access to their systems.
So what's the remedy here? Because if it's a concern, obviously I'm sure Heimdal can definitely play a role in this. What do we have to do? What does an MSP have to do, or the supply chain have to do?
Yeah, so if we take those two kind of problems at face value, I mean, the first thing is to address the rise of these businesses that are increasing in complexity on the cyber criminal side. I would say that's one of the remedies there is, which we've seen also kind of going up through the 2020s, I would say as a whole. You have these kind of Europol initiatives, Microsoft initiatives, where you go in a group scale chasing after cyber criminals, which should typically be state-backed as well. Could also be backed by the U.S. government, DOJ, et cetera, in the U.S. So you have these kind of state-backed chases for criminals across countries. The problem is now, though, that with that, the bulk of those will sit in countries where you can't reach them. Could be North Korea, could be Russia, but generally countries where there's very little opportunity for extradition or where the government is not playing ball with the Western countries that I kind of called out before. But then the second route is, of course, the increasing sophistication of tools, I would say, within those being attacked. So within the MSP space, the problem there mainly being the kind of the disjointment of the tools they use, which will then kind of lead into unification. So clearly, we've been seeing that throughout 2023. Heimdal, of course, being a first mover on the unification play. That will certainly be something I think is a continuing trend going into 2024. Where MSPs especially will double down on getting everything onto one platform and using everything in the same place.
So that's the concerns, and there's a remedy to that, which is good to hear. How about on a more positive note? What are you excited about what that's coming up in 2024?
Yeah, I think a couple of things is worth being excited about. If we take it very high level, there's a new generation coming up, which is much more technologically savvy. So this scarcity of resource that we've been seeing in the IT industry is mainly related to my generation, because my generation, there would only be a certain number of resources in there that were technical, whereas now everybody grows up with a MacBook or a Carbon X1 in their hand. So it's a much more technically savvy, or an iPhone for that matter. So there's much more technically savvy generation coming up, which means there'll be a lot more to choose from. And clearly there's a big demand for those resources in the market, so there'll be a lot more seeking education in that sector as well. So I think that's a long-term positive note, but that won't be positive in 2024. It'll probably be more into the 2030s that there'll be then all of a sudden plenty of technical IT resources available. But then on the other positive note, more short-term, is I do think there is a better offering available out there for if we take the MSPs in particular, MSPs to choose from. Heimdal certainly being one, having the widest stack in the market. There's also others you could choose from, which will at least reduce your complexity, maybe not make it as easy as Heimdal. I'd be subjective to say, but there's certainly a transition to easier management, ease of use in a more advanced way than you have today, at least.
Yeah, I think to your first point, I've seen it personally moving from construction tech into cybersecurity, and I've seen like a lot of the other industries, they have a lot of skills gaps that seem like they're going to be, it's difficult to bridge those gaps. Whereas cybersecurity, I see, is actually kind of a burgeoning, growing industry as opposed to a lot of others, and it's somewhere that lots of people are very excited to be involved in and join. And I've seen firsthand how quickly things are changing, and how not even just inside our company. I've been to lots of events, I spoke to customers, I spoke to prospects, and all of these people, and everybody really tries their hardest to be at the very forefront of what's going on. And that's why lots of people are more open to speaking to people like us and finding out exactly what's going on. What do we have that can help them do their job better? So I've definitely seen that in the conversations I've been having personally, which is great. So moving on, we have the looking at the kind of cyber attack side of things. What are the most sophisticated attacks that you think people need to prepare for in 2024?
Yeah, again, I think we've called out some of these quite a few times. Again, I think it's very helpful to, and when I say we called them out quite a few times, I mean over the years. I think it's very helpful again to go back to this thinking of the cyber attacker as a business. Again, you'll have these buckets where it's mass marketing, which will typically be mail advertisements, or the brute force attack model, which we kind of spearheaded a solution for back in 2018. But then in the more targeted function, you'll have these very complex attacks coming across, targeting either specific businesses or specific people, which leads to these very, very notable in the press breaches that you see. I think if I take that kind of two-pronged approach and break it down, I think in the mass marketing bucket, we're likely to see a shift in my book, where you'll try to leverage a external system to do that kind of mass marketing. So a logical step could be that you try to kind of within the attacker atmosphere breach the two, or bridge the two functions that you have there. Like you take a marketing platform like Marketo or Salesforce Pardot. If you can gain access to one of those, you all of a sudden have a very reliable sending platform that you can leverage in a multitude of scales on behalf of many businesses at the same time. Similar to kind of my prediction from last year, I believe, where I'm sure there's also been a tried throughout this year, but I kind of predicted that somebody was likely to penetrate Windows Update, because by that you get a unique platform for malware delivery onto a lot of systems. But clearly that hasn't happened. So maybe we'll go one notch down and say, okay, it's likely to happen in a different way. Somebody using a delivery platform that is trusted to then do mass marketing onto those. But that will be within the malware business. They'll have to bridge those two functions to make that happen, where you have a complex attack into a platform, and then you leverage that platform within your mass marketing team to get a volume delivery onto customers. Yeah. That will be extremely impactful, because everybody then all of a sudden all the emails comes from a reputable platform, reputable businesses. You're very likely to click them, and we also see that internally. I mean, you have these phishing campaigns that we try to do and get you on internally as well. And when we send it from a reputable one, more of our staff clicks than when we send it from a non-reputable one.
I got at least once. Yeah, that's super interesting. Actually, that seems super easy for someone potentially to do, right? And that is where all of your customer data is, all of your own data lives. It's
there's no doubt that that's a risk you need to think about, but it goes back to the supply chain point again. I was talking about MSPs before, but no doubt that all of these businesses using these platforms need to think twice, because these are also reputable targets where you host your mail templates, you host everything that you as a business use for marketing, but then all of a sudden you can in a indirect way become a target for leveraging, or it could be brand reputation, but you could be leveraged in a campaign to extort money from others, yeah, as well.
And the other side of that is the reputation damage to something like that is very hard to claw your way back from.
Yeah, I would say if Salesforce Pardot is compromised, you might as well close Salesforce probably, because then and, there's a fallout effect for sure.
So finally, big bet time. You may have already done it, you may have already said it, but what would your big bet be for 2024?
Yeah. I think my big bet is, well, I'll take two. I'll take one which is quite extreme, and then the more neutral one. I think my big bet is certainly we'll see a lot in the press about MSPs being compromised, because they are now such a big target. It's still a rapidly growing vertical. Customers are increasingly offloading IT to them. But then secondly, I think the other big bet, if I go really big, and I think a hacker wants to make a news splash somewhere, let's say you plant some malware on a rocket going to Mars, something like that, where business is very good at getting PR. Could be Mr. Elon Musk's SpaceX program. You get some malware onto that and you blow it up mid-space. That'll be another big bet if you want to make a big splash about something. But the reason I call that one out, it's probably not likely to happen, but the reason I call that one out, if you look at these malware groups at the moment, they are focusing also more and more on the PR branch. So within that business, you'll have, again, the targeted attacks, these kind of more generic mass attacks, the finance team, and kind of recently we've been seeing the PR team coming alive. Lockbit being recent examples of making a big fuss about it in the press, how they demand the ransom. That's just likely to increase. So if somebody wants to make a statement with it, hijacking a control tower or whatever it could be, is certainly a likely target as well.
And the PR for that would mean the next victim, when they get a whatever pop up
They'll
from
pay
them,
very quickly.
I'd be like, okay, if they blew up the spaceship on the way to Mars, like, we better pay up.
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a bit extreme to think along those lines, but it's likely that I'm not the only one thinking along those lines as to what do you then need to protect. Others will be thinking about what do you actually need to attack. Yeah.